Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I am an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description notes below my video where you will find links to all of my online shenanigans, including how to get my patterns to knit up for yourself, how to join the Watch Barbara Knit Facebook group, how to support me on Patreon, and where to get Watch Barbara Knit merchandise. As promised in last week's video, today is a swatch lab of Miss Bab's Sport Weight Laurel Falls, which is the yarn I use to knit my newest pattern called Rev It Up. I will link to the pattern tour, and I will also be linking to the 2nd February video, which is all about stitch definition, because you're gonna be hearing those words a lot out of my mouth. What a swatch lab is where I take a yarn that is new or new to me and put it through its paces by knitting up a swatch and evaluating that swatch to see what the yarn likes and what maybe is not its favorite thing to do. So we will jump right into the top-down view where I go through and show off the swatchy, and then after I'm done with that, come back because there's a couple of special things about this yarn that I want to talk about. Let's start by just taking a look at the yarn itself. So this is the yarn that I did my swatching when coming up with the Rev It Up pattern. Once I had gotten the pattern figured out, I decided I wanted a different color, and that's why you saw it in a different color, and that's why I have so much of this left, which was plenty to do the Swatch Lab with, and I could probably do another project. I have not used a whole lot of it at this point because I frogged many swatches. So the tag that this came with, because it was when they were Miss Babs was introducing it, just said this, new sport. This is the new sport yarn. And here it is, faded is this color. You can see they just turned a yummy 2-ply inside out. So that was the tag that came with this faded skein. But I do have the tags that I got for the one that I actually knit the sample. You can see it is Laurel Falls. The color that I used for the sample is Sagrada, and it is a sport weight yarn, 100% superwash Shaniko Merino wool, which after the close-up, we will talk about this Shaniko and what it means. 300 yards or 275 meters per 100 grams. 3 to 5 U.S. needle size, crochet gauge E to G. Care, machine wash, gentle, dry, flat for best results. We recommend alternating skeins and pre-washing high contrast colors, as some colors may release excess dye on the first wash. This is hand dyed in Mountain City, Tennessee, United States of America. So those are the specifications on the tag. 300 yards is a really good, like right in the solid sport weight range. So let's look at the yarn itself. This is, again, a lighter color yarn, which was good for my swatching, and it really, you'll be able to see it, hopefully. Let's take a look at the actual structure of the yarn. It is a 3-ply yarn. If I hold it like this, let me move him out of the way. If I hold it like this and spin it against its spin, you can see how it's kind of loosening and puffing up. And if I did that enough, yeah, you can see you can start to see that there are 3 separate plies that have been spun together, and they're spun fairly tightly. You saw how it sprung back very quickly. If I hold it like this is just holding it with no tension, and when I put it under tension, you can see it thins out a little bit, but not a whole lot, which means we're going to get some bloom, but not a lot. It's got a lot of, it's very springy yarn. It likes to pull back, and it holds this nice round shape, which tells you a lot about the yarn. You can see how the plies are visible and tightly they're not like super, super tight. I mean, this isn't like sock yarn tight, but it's pretty tight. And that's what's giving it the excellent stitch definition that we will be talking about. So let's get our swatch out. If you've watched a Swatch Lab before, you will be familiar with this swatch. In my computer, the chart is labeled as swatchy. That is the file. And what I have done here is this is a standard for me swatch so that I can take a look at and analyze what the yarn is going to excel at and what it might maybe not perform the best as. We also have our pointer duck. Our pointer duck accompanies us on this so that I can point out pertinent things. So what we do is we start with this, it's called Madeira lace is the name of this stitch pattern. And it has lace, but also this fabric, which is a biased fabric because we have the increases here and the decreases are down the middle. So you can see how it's coming in at an angle, and it gives you an idea of how the fabric is going to bias, because some yarns bias better than other. We've got a standard lace, which is it's got increases and decreases on the right side and just purled back. Then at the top, just a little eyelet row. We have stockinette. Then in this panel, we have a simple texture pattern. This is moss stitch, which is knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and then switching it out to make like a checkerboard. A little bit of reverse stockinette to set off the cables. And then this is true lace knitting. Knitted lace, I always forget which one it is. This has knit 2 together yarn over on both the right and the wrong side to see how it's going to perform. So let's take a look. It did everything very well is pretty much what you're seeing here. Things that maybe, so this, I blocked it fairly assertively and it pulled back. So that bounciness, that springiness that we were talking about means that it's not going to hold out like a super crisp block on this open, really, really open lace. I'm not saying it looks bad. If you want this kind of mesh, you can definitely do it with this. And the stitch definition is really, really high. But I blocked it like when it was wet, I blocked it like this. Okay. See how open that is? That is how it looked when it was blocked, like with the pins in it. And when you let it go, it springs back. And that's that memory of the wool and also the yarn structure and how tight it is spun. So it's not going to hold a really open lacy block. But I mean, you can see down here, I'm not saying it can't do lace with it, because it definitely, this looks just fine. But again, see how it just sort of closes up a little bit in this area. Again, when it was blocked, it looked like that, but then it pulls itself back in. That's the memory. So if you are wanting a super, super crisp, open lace, this might not be your best choice, but it's going to look fine. I'm not saying you can't do lace. It'll look fine. It's wool. It'll hold the block. I love the way the biased fabric looks. And that is a lot to do with the stitch definition. I've said stitch definition multiple times now. I will link to the video I did earlier this month on stitch definition so you have a better idea. But it's simply how well you can see the stitches. And this yarn has very good, very crisp stitch definition. It can be seen very well in the stockinette. Now, if what you're trying to do is create a softer fabric visually that that you can't see the stitches as well, then this is not going to be where this yarn performs the best. Something that has a little bit of fuzz, a little bit of alpaca, a little bit of mohair is gonna obscure these stitches a bit if that's what you're going for. I'm not saying this looks bad. I'm just trying to help you make decisions about what you want to use this for. We have our texture here, and the texture, I'm going to pick it up so you can see how it moves, because it actually, like when you're looking straight down on it, it's not that visible, but when I do this, you can see that that texture is there. The stitch definition really holds out and you can see it really well. Now, cables. Let's look at these babies. So what I have here is 1/1 cables that are every other right side row, and then 1/1 cables every right side row, and then back to every other. And honestly, they work just fine. It works just fine. I very rarely am a fan over the 1/1s because I like things that are like really big and punchy, but it's visible. You can see it, or we're fine. But this is just fantastic because of the round shape of this yarn and because of how nice and bouncy it is. The same thing that makes this pull back and makes it stand up at attention and really show that cable really has a lot of dimension to it, and it looks really nice. So this is an excellent yarn for cables, and we discussed this. Now, because I had a tiny bit left over, I decided I wanted to, because really of all the things here, what I like the best is the cables. I wanted to show you, I told you that I did the Rev It Up in Sagrada. I wanted to show you, I did just the cable portion in the Sagrada that I had. I didn't want to redo the whole swatch, but I wanted y'all to see something, because what we're talking about is the fabric and the yarn, and I'm trying to give you information on that, but yarn structure, fiber content, those are all elements, but color is also a huge determining factor on how the yarn is going to perform in the pattern you've selected. And I wanted to show you this so that you could see how picking a significantly darker color can have an effect on how visible your cables are. If you look here versus here, I mean, the cables are still there and they still pop up just as nicely, but they just, because it's a darker yarn, they're not quite as visible. So, I mean, you really, but somehow I feel like I like the 1/1s better in the darker color, but that's just personal preference. It's just what's going on here. And all of this just emphasizes the need to swatch, because you never know what's going to surprise you and how it's going to look. But so there, this is the Sagrada and this is the faded, and you can see the difference here. So selecting a darker color, you might want to go with a pattern that has bolder cables, like this would be the smallest cable, and they might even go up from that. It's just fine detail work tends to disappear in darker colors. I'm not saying don't knit in darker colors, because I love darker colors. Obviously, I picked this for my pattern. I just wanted you to see, because a lot of times a visual example makes more sense to people than just being told the darker yarn is going to obscure your detail a bit. So, and let's flip her over just for fun. Always like looking under the hood. You can see here what the reverse stockinette looks like. These are the columns from the purls on between. And I wanted you to see this, because on the wrong side, you can see they don't look perfect. Even though this is blocked, you still got some wiggliness on my purl columns. Happens to everybody. Obviously, this texture pattern is fully reversible. It looks the same here as it does, and the mesh I chose to do was also a garter mesh, so it looks the same on both sides. This is what, there we go. Dun, dun, dun. So that is the close-up look into the swatch. I hope that was informative and maybe gave you some ideas about what you might want to knit with this yarn after you knit Rev It Up, because that one of the reasons I designed Rev It Up was my swatching indicated that it's like, for me, its #1 strength, what was inspiring me was the stitch definition. So I chose to knit it in this highly textured piece with these ridges that would pop out. But also cables were high on my list, but I wanted to keep it simple. Now, as I mentioned in the top-down view, this yarn is 100% Shaniko Merino. And what is Shaniko Merino? Because I didn't know. We're going to go to here. This is the Miss Babs blog from her website. And down here is a whole article on Shaniko wool. And what it's saying, and the thing is I'm going to read this. If you like to read, you can read along with me. But I do know that I have quite a few viewers who are vision impaired, and I'm going to let them know what it says. It says the Shaniko Wool Company is a branded and certified program of American Merino wool. The wool comes from Merino and Merino Rambouillet sheep raised in the Great Basin region of the American West. These sheep are specifically selected and bred for not only a consistently fine, long, staple wool, but for their ability to thrive on the open pasture in range conditions while giving back to the land as they eat their way through harmful flora, helping the land to thrive. Now, this talks about the Shaniko Wool Company, and it says the Shaniko Wool Company is the first farm group in the United States certified under the Global Responsible Wool Standard developed by Textile Exchange. The Responsible Wool Standard aims to improve the welfare of sheep and the land they graze on. In addition to stringent guidelines covering the humane treatment of sheep, the RWS provides full traceability of wool and sets strict standards for worker welfare and careful land management practices that ensure the continued sustainability of the ranges where the sheep are raised. And there's a couple more links. One goes to the actual Shaniko Wool Company and then to the Responsible Wool Standard. I will link to all of these things if you want to learn more about it. So what it is this is a U.S. product that is the sheep are sustainably husbanded. That's like animal husbandry, right? So husbanded, whatever you want to call it, and the workers are fairly treated, and it helps the land rather than damaging the land, and you know exactly where this wool is coming from and that it is being created in a sustainable, environmentally friendly, and humane way. So I think it is awesome that we have independent dyers like Miss Babs who are sourcing their wool responsibly like this and supporting, because they said this is the first kind of wool farm of its kind in the United States. So if we support it, then hopefully there will be more. So that is what I wanted to talk about a little bit more. So that is Laurel Falls. Here's the ball of yarn. I used it for Rev It Up, but I can think of all kinds of amazing patterns that you could use this yarn for. It would look great in Curiosity. I will actually link a picture of Curiosity. It's another sport weight pattern of mine that I think would work really well in this yarn. If you have any questions about some of the things I've talked about here, about the swatch, those sorts of things, please, I would love to continue this conversation in the comments. If there are other yarns that you would like to see taken into the Swatch Lab and gone through, make a suggestion, especially if it's a new yarn I may not have heard of yet. But this is one of my fun experimentation kind of videos that I like to make. So if you like this video, please give it the thumbs up, click that like button. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.